They said she was nothing, a broken omega discarded like trash. But tonight, in a blood-soaked throne room, where the most powerful alpha in 5 kingdoms was tearing himself apart, Elin Rowe would do what no warrior, no mage, no noble dared attempt. She would touch the beast everyone feared. And in doing so, she'd trigger a war that would shatter everything they knew about power, fate, and survival. This is her story. The girl who had nothing, who became everything. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments, hit that like button, and stay until the end. Because what happens next will blow your mind. The screaming started 3 hours before dawn. Elin Rowe heard it from the lowest hall of the fortress, where the forgotten slept on stone floors and waited for scraps. The sound wasn't human, it was something worse, raw, animal, a noise that made your bones want to crawl out of your skin and run. She sat up, pulling her thin blanket tighter. Around her, the other rejects stirred. Some covered their ears. Others whispered prayers to gods who'd stopped listening years ago. "It's the king," someone muttered. "He's losing it again." Elin said nothing. She'd learned silence early. When you were nothing, when even your own pack looked at you like a mistake, you learned to disappear, to take up no space, to breathe quietly and hope nobody remembered you existed. But tonight, something felt different. The fortress of Varkesh sat on the edge of civilization, a brutal stone giant carved into the northern mountains. Beyond its walls, the wasteland stretched for 1,000 miles, frozen, hostile, filled with things that would kill you just for practice. Inside the walls, life wasn't much better. This was a place built for war, ruled by strength, where weakness got you buried in unmarked graves. King Darius Vorn had held this territory for 12 years. 12 years of iron control, strategic brilliance, and a reputation so fierce that rival kingdoms sent tributes just to avoid his attention. He was an alpha in every sense, dominant, powerful, unchallengeable. Until 6 months ago, when the madness started. Elin pushed herself to her feet. Her body ached, always did. Working the lowest kitchens meant hauling water from wells, scrubbing pots until your hands bled, eating whatever the rats didn't get to first. She was 22 and felt 50. "Where are you going?" asked Mira, an older woman missing half her teeth. She'd been kind to Elin once, fed her when nobody else would. "Just looking," Elin said. "Don't." Mira grabbed her wrist. "They'll kill you for being in the wrong corridor, you know that." Elin did know. She'd seen it happen. Some kid from the outer villages wandered into the officer's wing looking for a bathroom, and they strung him up as an example. In Varkesh, you stayed in your lane, or you died. But the screaming kept going, and underneath it, Elin heard something else, something that made her chest ache in a way she didn't understand. Pain. Not the kind you got from a beating or a broken bone. Deeper than that, the kind that came from being trapped inside yourself with no way out. She pulled free from Mira's grip. "I'll be careful." The corridors twisted upward like the inside of a dead animal. Torches burned at irregular intervals, casting shadows that looked like clawed hands. Elin moved quietly. Years of avoiding attention had made her good at it. She pressed herself against walls when she heard footsteps, ducked into alcoves when guards passed. The fortress was in chaos. Soldiers ran in formation toward the upper levels. Officers shouted orders that contradicted each other. She caught fragments of conversation. Chains snapped again. 3 men down. "He'll kill us all," and kept moving. The throne room sat at the fortress's heart, a massive chamber built to intimidate. Elin had only seen it once, years ago, when every servant was required to witness a traitor's execution. She remembered the high ceiling, the banners from conquered territories, the throne itself, carved from a single piece of black stone that seemed to swallow light. She remembered Darius Vorn sitting on that throne, watching a man die without blinking. Now, as she crept closer, she heard him. Not commanding, not controlled, roaring. The doors to the throne room were reinforced iron, built to withstand a siege. They were closed, but not locked, probably because nobody wanted to be the one to get close enough to turn the bolt. Elin pressed her ear against the cold metal. Inside, something massive slammed against stone. Wood splintered. A man's voice, cultured, educated, was trying to speak calmly. "Your Majesty, please, the chains are consecrated steel. If you'll just..." The response was a snarl that made Elin's teeth hurt. She shouldn't be here. This was insane. She was nobody, a rejected Omega from a pack so small it didn't even have a name. She'd been 6 when her own father looked at her and said, "Useless. Won't survive winter." They dumped her at a way station and left. She'd survived anyway, out of spite more than anything else. But survival wasn't the same as living. The door was heavy. She had to use both hands, putting her full weight into it. It moved 6 inches. Enough. The throne room looked like a war zone. The black throne had been shattered. Huge chunks of stone scattered across the floor. Banners hung in tatters. Blood streaked the walls. And in the center of the destruction, surrounded by broken chains and terrified men, was Darius Vorn. He was bigger than she remembered. Alphas always were. Something about their biology made them massive, built for dominance. But Darius was extreme even among his kind. 7 feet tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that made gravity feel heavier around him. Right now, he looked like something out of a nightmare. His eyes had gone completely black. No iris, no white, just endless dark. His hands were clawed, tipped with something that wasn't quite nail and wasn't quite talon. Veins stood out on his neck and arms, pulsing with something that glowed faintly red beneath his skin. 4 chains were still attached to him, thick as a man's wrist, bolted to the floor with runes that flickered and died even as she watched. He strained against them, muscles bunching, and one of the chains cracked. Around him, a dozen men tried to maintain some kind of control. Soldiers in full armor kept their distance, spears ready but shaking. A mage in elaborate robes was chanting something, hands weaving patterns in the air, but whatever spell he was attempting kept falling apart before it took hold. And standing closest to the king, close enough to be in danger but too proud to back away, was a nobleman Elin recognized. Lord Castor Thane, the king's chief advisor. Tall, gray-haired, with the kind of face that looked carved from ice. "Your Majesty," Thane said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "You must fight this. The curse is trying to break you, but you are stronger." Darius lunged. The remaining chains snapped like thread. He moved faster than something that size should be able to move, crossing 15 feet in a heartbeat. His hand closed around Thane's throat, lifting the older man off his feet. Thane didn't scream, didn't beg, just stared into those black eyes with something like resignation. The soldiers rushed forward, spears leveled. The mage shouted a word that made the air crack. And Elin, stupid, broken, worthless Elin, found herself moving. She didn't think. Thinking would have stopped her. She just ran, slipping between soldiers who were too focused on the king to notice her. Her bare feet slapped against stone. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She'd never been fast, never been strong. But she was small, and she'd spent her whole life being invisible. Those skills mattered now. Darius had Thane pinned against a wall, his clawed hand slowly crushing the man's windpipe. The mage was screaming something about containment fields. A soldier raised his spear, aiming for the king's back, a killing blow, treason, but maybe the only option left. Elin reached them first. She didn't grab Darius's arm. She wasn't that stupid. She just placed her hand against his back, right between his shoulder blades, where his shirt had torn and skin showed through. The effect was instantaneous. Darius froze. The black drained from his eyes like ink and water replaced by their natural color. Dark gray, sharp, aware. His hand opened, and Thane collapsed to the floor, gasping. The red glow under his skin faded, his claws retracted, and then he turned to look at her. For a moment, nobody moved. The entire throne room held its breath. Elin stared up at the king of Varkesh, this brutal legend who'd carved a kingdom out of hostile territory, and saw something she didn't expect. Confusion. "Who," Darius said slowly, his voice rough but human again, "are you?" She opened her mouth, closed it, didn't know what to say. What do you tell a king when you're nobody, when you shouldn't even be in the same room as him? She swallowed. "I'm Elin. I work in the kitchens." It was such a stupid thing to say. The king had just nearly murdered his closest advisor, had broken consecrated chains and terrified a room full of warriors, and she was introducing herself like they'd met at a market. But Darius just kept staring at her. His hand came up, slowly, carefully, and touched the spot where her palm had been pressed against his back, like he was checking to see if she'd burned him. "How did you do that?" he asked. "I don't know." It was the truth. She had no idea what had just happened. She'd touched him, and he'd stopped. That was all she knew. Around them, the room began to move again. Soldiers lowered their weapons, looking at each other with expressions caught between relief and disbelief. The mage stopped chanting and just stared, his mouth slightly open. Thane was being helped to his feet by two guards, one hand pressed to his bruised throat. "Explain," Darius said, and despite the calmness of his voice, it was absolutely a command. Elin took a step back. Her hand trembled. I heard you screaming, and I don't know what I thought. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be here. I'll go." "No." His hand shot out and caught her wrist. Not hard. He was clearly trying to be gentle, but she felt the strength in his grip. He could snap her bones without effort. "Don't move." She froze. Darius looked past her, toward Thane. "Castor?" The older man straightened, still breathing hard. "Your Majesty." "What just happened?" "I'm not certain." Thane's eyes fixed on Elin with an intensity that made her want to disappear. "But I intend to find out." They took her to a room she'd never seen before. Some kind of study, filled with books and maps, and weapons mounted on walls. It was warm. There was carpet. Elin had never stood on carpet before. Thane sat behind a massive desk, writing something. Darius stood by the window, staring out at the wasteland. Two guards flanked the door. And Elin stood in the center of the room, trying not to exist too loudly. "Name," Thane said without looking up. "Elin Rowe." "Age?" 22. "Pack affiliation?" She hesitated. "None." That made him look up. "Explain." "I was rejected. When I was 6, they said I was defective." Thane's expression didn't change, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. Not sympathy. People like him didn't do sympathy. More like calculation. "And you've been working in this fortress for how long?" 16 years. "Doing what?" "Kitchen work, cleaning, whatever needed doing." He made a note. "And tonight, you decided to enter the king's throne room during a rage episode because I didn't decide anything. How did she explain it? I heard him, and I thought maybe I could help." "You thought," Darius said from the window, his voice flat, "that you, a kitchen worker with no training, no authority, no power, could help where soldiers and mages had failed." When he put it like that, it sounded insane. It was insane. "Yes," she said anyway. Darius turned to face her. In the lamplight, she could see him more clearly. He was younger than she'd thought. Maybe 35, 40 at most. His face was hard, all sharp angles and old scars, but his eyes were intelligent. They studied her the way you'd study a puzzle. "Do you understand what I almost did tonight?" he asked. "You almost killed Lord Thane." "I almost killed everyone in that room. I've been fighting this curse for 6 months, and every time it gets worse, stronger. Tonight was the closest I've come to losing completely. If you hadn't—" He stopped, shook his head. "Why did you touch me?" "I don't know." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." Elin met his eyes, which was probably another stupid thing to do, but she was tired and confused, and her wrist still hurt where he'd grabbed it. "I just wanted to help. I'm sorry if that was wrong." For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Thane cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, I believe we need to test this." "Test what?" "Her effect on you." Thane stood, moving around the desk. "The curse that afflicts you is tied to your alpha nature. It feeds on dominance, aggression, the very traits that make you powerful. Every treatment we've attempted has failed because we've been trying to suppress those traits, which only makes the curse fight harder. But this girl—" He looked at Elin like she was an interesting specimen. "She didn't suppress anything. She just calmed you, instantly." "You think she can cure me?" Darius said. "I think she might be the only option we have left." Elin's stomach dropped. "Wait, I don't know how to cure anything. I don't even know what I did." "Which is why we need to test it," Thane said, "under controlled conditions, to see if the effect is repeatable, and if so, how it works." "And if I say no?" Elin asked. The room got very quiet. Thane's expression remained neutral. "You are, of course, free to refuse. However, I should point out that the king's condition is deteriorating. The next episode could occur in days, hours even. And without a way to control it, he spread his hands. Many people will die. It was a trap wrapped in logic. Say no, and she'd be responsible for whatever happened next. Say yes, and she'd be volunteering for something she didn't understand. Darius was still watching her. I won't force you, he said quietly. But Castor's right. This curse will kill me eventually, and probably everyone around me first. If you can help, he paused. I'd be grateful. There was something in his voice, not a command, not manipulation, just honesty, raw and uncomfortable. Elin thought about the screaming she'd heard, the pain underneath it, the way he'd looked when the madness cleared, confused and horrified by what he'd nearly done. She thought about her own life, 16 years in the kitchens, invisible, forgotten, waiting to die of something mundane and unmourned. At least this would matter. Okay, she said. I'll help. Chat. The testing started the next morning. They brought her to a chamber deep in the fortress, windowless, stone-walled, with runes carved into every surface. Elin recognized some of them from the throne room. Binding magic. Containment. Darius was already there, standing in the center of a circle of symbols that glowed faintly blue. He looked tired. She wondered if he'd slept. Thane was there too, along with the mage from last night, a man named Aldrich who seemed perpetually nervous, and a woman Elin didn't recognize. Tall, severe, dressed in armor that looked ceremonial rather than practical. This is Commander Kara Vex, Thane said, head of the king's personal guard. She'll be observing. Kara studied Elin with undisguised skepticism. This is what stopped the king? Her. Apparently, Thane said dryly. They had Elin approach Darius in stages. First, just standing near him, then closer, then touching his hand. Each time, Aldrich cast some kind of detection spell, muttering numbers and adjustments. Fascinating, the mage said after the fourth test. There's no energy transfer, no magic at all, actually. It's more like, he frowned, resonance, like two frequencies canceling each other out. Explain that in words normal people understand, Kara said. Aldrich gestured helplessly. I can't. I've never seen anything like this. They tried different things. Having Elin touch Darius while he was agitated, they made him angry on purpose, which turned out to be disturbingly easy. Having her touch him through cloth, which didn't work. Having her touch him while the mage cast various spells, which mostly just gave everyone headaches. By midday, Elin was exhausted. They'd been at this for hours, and she hadn't eaten since yesterday. Her head hurt. Her feet hurt. She wanted to lie down somewhere dark and quiet. One more test, Thane said. She's done, Darius said sharply. Look at her. She's about to collapse. This is important. I said she's done. The king's voice dropped into a register that made the runes on the walls flicker. We'll continue tomorrow. Thane's jaw tightened, but he nodded. As you wish, Your Majesty. They brought Elin food, real food, not kitchen scraps, and showed her to a room. Not a cell, an actual room with a bed and blankets and a basin of clean water. She stared at it for a full minute, not believing it was real. When the guard left, she locked the door and sat on the floor with her back against it. The bed was too nice. She'd dirty it. Besides, she was used to stone. She must have fallen asleep like that because the next thing she knew, someone was knocking. Elin jerked awake, disoriented. The room was dark except for moonlight through a narrow window. The knocking came again, gentle but persistent. She unlocked the door and found Darius standing there, alone. No guards. He looked different out of formal clothing. Just a plain shirt and trousers, his hair loose instead of tied back. Almost normal, except for the fact that he was massive and radiating the kind of presence that made normal people nervous. Can I come in? He asked. It was strange hearing a king ask permission. Elin stepped aside. Darius entered, glancing around the room. His eyes landed on his bed, still perfectly made, untouched, then on the spot where she'd been sleeping on the floor. Something shifted in his expression. You're not using the bed, he said. It's too nice. It's a bed. That's what beds are for. Elin didn't know what to say to that. In her experience, nice things weren't for people like her. Darius sighed and sat down on the floor, his back against the wall. After a moment, she sat too, keeping some distance between them. "I wanted to thank you," he said, "for earlier, for helping." "You already did." "No, I commanded you to help, and you agreed because you're kind and probably too scared to say no. That's not the same as thanking you." He looked at her directly. "So, thank you, Elin Rowe. You probably saved my life tonight. Definitely saved Castor's." She didn't know how to respond to sincerity. It wasn't something she had much practice with. "You're welcome," she managed. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the fortress was settling into its night rhythms, guard changes, distant shouts, the ever-present wind screaming across the wasteland. "Can I ask you something?" Darius said. "Okay." "Why did you really come to the throne room? The truth?" Elin considered lying, but she was too tired for lies. "Because you sounded like how I feel. All the time. Like you were trapped and couldn't get out and nobody could help." She pulled her knees to her chest. "And I thought maybe if I could help you, it would mean I'm not completely useless." Darius was quiet for a long moment. "You're not useless. You don't know me. I know you did something tonight that no one else in this fortress could do. That counts for something." "Does it?" Elin laughed, bitter. "Tomorrow they'll test me some more, poke at me like an interesting tool. And if I can't help you again, they'll send me back to the kitchens and forget I exist. That's how this works." "Not if I have anything to say about it," Darius said quietly. She looked at him, surprised. "I meant what I said earlier," he continued. "I won't force you to do this. If you want to leave right now, I'll have you escorted safely to whatever city you choose. I'll give you money, letters of introduction, whatever you need to start over somewhere else. You don't owe me anything." It was a genuine offer. She could hear it in his voice. And for a moment, Elin actually considered it. She could leave. Go somewhere warmer, maybe. Somewhere people didn't know she was defective. Start fresh. But then what? She'd still be alone. Still be the Omega nobody wanted. And eventually she'd hear about how King Darius Vorn had died in a rage episode, along with half his court, and she'd know she could have stopped it. "I'll stay," she said. "For now." Darius nodded. "Then I promise you this. While you're here, you're under my protection. Anyone who treats you poorly answers to me. Understood? You can't protect me from everyone. Watch me." There was something almost funny about it, this powerful king offering to protect her, when she was the one who apparently kept him from tearing himself apart. But she didn't laugh. She just nodded. He stood, unfolding to his full height. "Get some sleep, real sleep in the bed. That's an order from your king. I thought you weren't going to force me to do things. I'm making an exception for basic self-care." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Elin, for what it's worth, I don't think you're broken. I think you're something else entirely." He left before she could ask what he meant. Elin sat there for a long time, staring at the closed door. Then, slowly, she got up and climbed into the bed. The mattress was soft. The blankets smelled clean. She pulled them up to her chin, and for the first time in years, fell asleep without crying. The tests continued for 3 days. Then, on the 4th morning, everything changed. Elin was in the testing chamber with Darius, Thane, Aldrich, and Kara. They'd developed a routine. Start with basic contact, measure the effects, try variations. It was tedious but manageable. Almost boring. Then the alarm bells started ringing. Kara's hand went to her sword instantly. "What is that?" "Attack alarm," Thane said, already moving toward the door. "We're under siege." Darius went very still. "Who?" They got the answer minutes later, when a bloodied scout was dragged into the throne room. The kid, couldn't have been more than 17, was barely standing, his armor dented and torn. "Army!" he gasped. "From the south. Thousands. They're carrying the Draven banner." The room went silent. "Kael Draven," Darius said flatly. Of course. Elin didn't recognize the name, but everyone else clearly did. Kara swore quietly. Aldrich had gone pale. Even Thane looked concerned, which seemed significant given that the man's default expression was carved stone. "Who's Kael Draven?" Elin asked. Darius turned to her. "Another Alpha. Controls the southern territories. We've been at peace for 5 years, but it's always been fragile." His expression darkened. If he's bringing an army here, it's because he wants something. What could he possibly... Thane stopped, looked at Elin. Oh no. What? Elin asked, but she had a sinking feeling she already knew. The answer came 2 hours later when Kyle Draven himself rode up to the fortress gates under a white flag of parley. They assembled in the throne room, Darius on his shattered throne, Thane at his right hand, Kara and a dozen guards forming a perimeter. Elin was told to stay out of sight, behind a pillar, but she could still see everything. Kyle Draven entered like he owned the place. He was tall, not as tall as Darius, but still imposing. Lean where Darius was broad, with sharp features and dark eyes that swept the room like he was cataloging weaknesses. He wore black armor polished to a mirror shine, and he moved with the kind of controlled grace that suggested violence was always one decision away. Darius, he said, his voice smooth. It's been too long. Kyle. Darius didn't stand. Didn't offer the traditional greeting. You've brought an army to my gates. I assume this isn't a social visit. Perceptive as ever. Kale smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'll be direct. I'm here for the girl. Elin's blood went cold. What girl? Darius asked, his voice carefully neutral. Don't insult my intelligence. You found an Omega who can control Alpha Rage. My sources confirmed it 3 days ago. I want her. She's not for sale. I'm not offering to buy her. Kale's smile widened. I'm claiming her, as is my right. Thane stepped forward. You have no rights here. Actually, I do. Kale reached into his armor and pulled out a folded document. Elin Rowe, age 22, rejected by the Kessler Pack at age 6. According to Pack law, a rejected Omega can be claimed by any Alpha who can prove biological compatibility. He held up the document. I have documentation showing that Miss Rowe and I share a rare genetic marker, which means she's mine. Elin felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. She didn't remember anyone named Kessler. Didn't remember much from before the rejection, just cold and hunger and her father's disgusted face. But Kyle apparently remembered her. That law, Darius said slowly, applies to pack matters. This is kingdom territory. A distinction without a difference. Unless you're willing to go to war over one defective Omega? Kale's eyes found Elin's hiding spot. He looked directly at her. Hello, Elin. I've been looking for you for a very long time. She couldn't breathe. His gaze pinned her like an insect. She stays here, Darius said. His voice had dropped into that dangerous register. Under my protection. Your protection? Kyle laughed. I heard about your little curse problem, Darius. About how you're barely holding yourself together. You really think you're in a position to protect anyone? I think you should leave while you still can. Or what? You'll attack me under a flag of parley? Murder a fellow Alpha in front of witnesses? Kyle spread his hands. I don't think so. You're too honorable for that, which is why I'm giving you a choice. Hand over the girl or I'll take her. And if I have to take her, a lot of people will die first. The tension in the room was suffocating. Kara's hand was on her sword. The guards were ready to move. One word from Darius, and this would turn into a bloodbath. But Darius just stood there, staring at Kyle with an expression Elin couldn't read. 3 days, the king said finally. I'll give you my answer in 3 days. 2, Kyle countered. I'm not a patient man. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Elin, don't bother trying to run. I have people watching every exit. You leave this fortress, and I'll know. He smiled at her. See you soon. He left, his boots echoing on stone. The moment he was gone, the room exploded into argument. Kara wanted to mobilize the entire garrison. Aldrich was babbling about defensive wards. Thane was calculating supply lines and siege durations. And Elin just stood there, numb, trying to process what had just happened. She wasn't safe. She'd never been safe. And now, because she'd tried to help, she'd put everyone in danger. Darius crossed the room to her in 3 strides. Elin, look at me. She did. His eyes were gray and steady. I'm not giving you to him, he said. I don't care what laws he cites or what army he brought. You're under my protection, and that means something. He'll kill everyone, she whispered. He'll try. But we've held this fortress against worse. Not while you're cursed, not while... Her voice broke. This is my fault. No. Darius gripped her shoulders, gentle but firm. This is Kael's fault. He's the one making demands and threatening war, not you. Never you. But Elin could see the truth in everyone's faces. The calculations they were making. One girl versus the whole fortress. It wasn't really a choice. That night, alone in her room, Elin made a decision. She couldn't let people die because of her. She wouldn't. But she also wouldn't let Kael Draven take her like some kind of prize. There was a third option. A dangerous one. Possibly a fatal one. But it was hers. And for the first time in her life, Elin Rowe was going to choose her own path, no matter where it led. The ancient texts were kept in a vault 3 levels below the fortress, behind a door that required 2 keys and a blood seal. Elin had never seen it. Most people hadn't. But she knew someone who had access. She found Aldrich in his workshop at midnight, surrounded by books and half-finished spells that sparked and fizzled in the dark. The mage looked up when she entered, startled. "Miss Rowe, you shouldn't be here." "I need information," Elin said, "about alpha claims and the laws around them." Aldrich's expression shifted from surprise to understanding. "You're looking for a way out." "I'm looking for options." He hesitated, then gestured to a chair. "Sit, but I can't promise you'll like what I find." They spent 2 hours going through records, dusty scrolls and crumbling ledgers that documented pack law going back centuries. Most of it was brutal. Omegas had almost no rights. Rejected Omegas had even less. And the claim Kael was making, biological compatibility, was apparently ironclad. "There's only one exception," Aldrich said finally, pointing to a passage written in faded ink. "The trial of severance. An Omega can invoke it to challenge a claim, but..." He trailed off. "But what?" "It's dangerous. More than dangerous. It's essentially a death sentence. The Omega has to survive 3 trials designed to prove they're strong enough to stand alone. No pack, no alpha, just themselves." He looked at her seriously. "In the last 200 years, it's been invoked 11 times. 2 people survived. 2 out of 11. Those were terrible odds, but they were better than being claimed by Kael Draven." "How do I invoke it?" Elin asked. "You can't be serious." "How?" Aldrich stared at her for a long moment, then sighed and pulled out another scroll. "It has to be done publicly, in front of both parties. You declare your intention to undergo the trials. If you survive, the claim is voided permanently. If you fail..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Elin read the requirements carefully. The trials weren't standardized. They adapted to the person, testing whatever the old magic decided was necessary. Physical strength, mental fortitude, spiritual resilience. No one knew what they'd face until they were inside. "When could this happen?" she asked. "Immediately, if you invoke it. The magic doesn't wait." Aldrich leaned back. "But Miss Rowe, I have to ask, why risk this? The king said he'd protect you." "The king is cursed and surrounded by enemies. He can't protect himself, let alone me." Elin folded the scroll carefully. "This way, at least I'm choosing my own fate. Or choosing your own death." "Maybe, but it'll be mine." She left before he could argue further, the scroll tucked inside her shirt. Her heart was pounding, her hands shook, but her mind was clear. Tomorrow, she'd tell Darius what she planned to do. Tonight, she needed to prepare. She returned to her room and tried to sleep, but her mind kept racing. What would the trials be? What if she failed? What if... A knock interrupted her spiral. It was late, well past midnight. Elin opened the door expecting a guard, but found Darius instead. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, his hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "Not really. Mind if I come in?" She stepped aside. This was becoming a habit, the king visiting her room late at night, both of them too wired to rest. It probably wasn't appropriate. She didn't care. Darius sat on the floor with his back against the wall, and Elin joined him. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind howl outside. "I'm not giving you to him," Darius said finally. "I know you're worried, but..." "I'm going to invoke the trial of severance," Elin interrupted. He went very still. "You're what?" "Tomorrow, when Kael comes for his answer. I'm going to invoke the trial." She explained what she'd learned from Aldrich. The laws, the exceptions, the terrible odds. It's the only way to void his claim without starting a war. Darius was staring at her like she'd grown a second head. Do you understand what you're suggesting? Those trials kill people, Elin. Strong people, trained warriors. What makes you think I have any other choice? She turned to face him fully. You can't fight Kael and his army while you're barely holding yourself together. Your people will die defending me, and then he'll take me anyway. This way, at least there's a chance. A tiny chance. 2 survivors out of 11. Better than 0? Darius stood abruptly, pacing the small room. No, absolutely not. We'll find another way. There is no other way. Then I'll give him what he wants. Not you, but something else. Territory, resources, whatever it takes to make him leave. He doesn't want territory. Elin stood too, frustrated. He wants me. Because I can do something no one else can. You think he's going to accept gold instead? Then I'll fight him, personally. Single combat. Winner takes all. While you're cursed, you'd lose. You know you would. The words hung in the air between them, brutal and true. Darius's hands clenched into fists. She could see him struggling, trying to find an argument that worked, a solution that didn't end with her walking into almost certain death. Why? He asked finally, his voice rough. Why are you so willing to throw your life away? I'm not throwing it away. I'm claiming it. Elin stepped closer. My whole life, other people have decided what I'm worth. My pack said I was defective. Your fortress said I was invisible. Kael says I'm his property. But the trial, that's mine. My choice. My risk. And if I die, at least I'll die as myself. Darius looked at her for a long moment. You're terrifying, you know that? I'm just tired of being afraid. He reached out and touched her face, gentle, careful, like she might break. If you do this, I can't help you. The trials are designed to be faced alone. I know. And if you fail, I won't. She didn't know if that was true, but she said it anyway. I've survived this long on nothing but spite and luck. I'll survive this too. Spite and luck aren't enough for the trials. Then I'll find something else. She caught his hand, holding it against her cheek. But I'm doing this. With or without your blessing. Darius closed his eyes. You're asking me to watch you die. I'm asking you to trust me. When he opened his eyes again, they were pained but resigned. I hate this. I know. But I understand it. He pulled his hand back slowly. And I'll respect your choice, even though every instinct I have is screaming to lock you in this room until Kael gives up and goes home. He won't give up. I know. Darius moved toward the door, then stopped. Elin, when this is over, when you survive, we're going to have a long conversation about your complete lack of self-preservation. Looking forward to it. He left. Elin stood there for a while, her heart hammering, before finally climbing into bed. She didn't sleep, just stared at the ceiling and counted her breaths until dawn. The morning came too fast. Servants arrived with formal clothing, a simple dress in deep blue, much nicer than anything she'd ever worn. They helped her bathe and fix her hair, treating her with a careful respect that felt strange. One of them, a young woman named Sarah, kept looking at her with something like awe. Is it true? Sarah whispered. That you stopped the king's rage just by touching him? Elin nodded. That's incredible. You're incredible. I'm really not. But Sarah just smiled like she knew better. They assembled in the main courtyard at midday. Kael had brought his entire army to the gates. Thousands of soldiers in perfect formation, a show of force designed to intimidate. It was working. The fortress defenders looked nervous, outnumbered at least 3-1. Kael himself stood at the front, still wearing his polished black armor. He smiled when he saw Elin, like they were old friends meeting for tea. Darius stood on the fortress steps, Thane and Kara flanking him. He looked every inch the king, formal armor, crown, the kind of presence that made people stand straighter. But Elin could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw was clenched. Darius, Kael called out, have you made your decision? I have. Darius's voice carried across the courtyard. But the choice isn't mine to make. He stepped aside and Elin walked forward. The crowd murmured. Kael's smile widened. Elin, how lovely to see you again, though I don't recall us ever meeting before. We haven't, Elin said. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. But you seem to know a lot about me. I've been tracking you for years, ever since I realized what you were. He descended from his horse, moving toward her with predatory grace. You're a harmonizer, incredibly rare. 1 in a million, maybe less. Your presence balances alpha aggression, neutralizes rage, creates perfect stability. In short, you're priceless. I'm a person. You're a resource, one I intend to use. He stopped a few feet away. But I can be generous. Come willingly, and I'll treat you well. You'll have comfort, safety, everything you need. All I ask is that you do what you were born to do, keep me stable. Like a tool, Elin said flatly. Like a partner. Partners have choices. You're not offering me any. Kale's expression hardened. I'm offering you life. Refuse me, and this fortress falls. Everyone dies. Including you. Is that really what you want? The crowd was watching, silent, waiting. Elin could feel the weight of their stares. Fear, hope, resentment. Some of them probably wanted her to just go with Kale. End the threat. Save their lives. She couldn't blame them, but she wasn't going to do it. I invoke, Elin said clearly, the trial of severance. The reaction was immediate. Gasps from the crowd. Kale's smile vanished. Even Darius, who'd known this was coming, looked shaken. You can't be serious, Kale said. I'm completely serious. Elin pulled out the scroll Aldrich had given her and held it up. According to pack law, any Omega can challenge a claim through the trials. If I survive, your claim is void. Permanently. You won't survive. Then you'll get what you want anyway. But at least I'll have tried. Kyle stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then he laughed, sharp and humorless. You'd rather die than accept my claim? That's incredibly stupid. Probably, but it's my choice. Fine. Kale's voice went cold. Invoke the trial. Die in whatever horrible way the magic decides. When it's over, I'll claim your corpse just to make a point. You're disgusting, Kara muttered from the steps. Kale ignored her, his attention fixed on Elin. Any last words before you throw your life away? Elin looked back at Darius. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Pride, fear, frustration, all mixed together. She wanted to say something meaningful, something that would matter if she didn't make it back. But words felt inadequate, so she just nodded. He nodded back. That was enough. Elin turned to the scroll and read the invocation aloud. The words were old, written in a language she didn't recognize, but somehow she knew how to pronounce them. They felt heavy in her mouth, tasting of copper and ash. The moment she finished, the world changed. The air grew thick, charged with energy that made her skin prickle. The ground beneath her feet began to glow, symbols appearing like they'd been burned into the stone, forming a perfect circle around her. The crowd backed away instinctively. And then reality tore open. It wasn't a door or a portal, more like the world just decided to be somewhere else. One moment Elin was standing in the courtyard surrounded by people. The next, she was alone in darkness, so complete it felt solid. She couldn't see, couldn't hear, couldn't feel anything except the stone beneath her feet and the hammering of her own heart. Hello? Her voice disappeared into nothing, no echo, no response. Then light bloomed ahead of her, cold and blue and utterly wrong. It illuminated a path forward, narrow and winding, lined with walls that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. Elin started walking. What else could she do? The path led her through impossible spaces, rooms that were too large to fit inside the fortress, corridors that twisted back on themselves. She passed doorways that showed other places, familiar rooms from her childhood, the kitchens where she'd worked, scenes she didn't recognize at all. First trial, a voice said from everywhere and nowhere. It didn't sound human. What are you without them? The path opened into a vast chamber, and standing in the center, waiting for her, were people she recognized. Her father, the pack leader who'd rejected her. Every person who'd ever looked at her with disgust or pity or contempt. They weren't real. She knew that logically, but they looked real, sounded real. Defective, her father said, his voice exactly as she remembered. Weak, useless. A waste of resources, the pack leader added. Should have left you in the cold. More voices joined in, overlapping, saying every cruel thing she'd ever heard about herself. And beneath it all, that inhuman voice asking again, "What are you without them?" Elin wanted to run, wanted to cover her ears and scream until they stopped, but she forced herself to stand still, to breathe, to think. What was she without them? For most of her life, she would have said nothing. She'd defined herself by their rejection, their judgment, their dismissal. She was the girl nobody wanted, the Omega who didn't belong. But that wasn't true anymore. "I'm Elin Rowe," she said out loud, "and you don't get to tell me who I am." The figures flickered. Her father's face twisted. "You're nothing without us." "You're right." Elin stepped forward. "I'm nothing to you. But that's not the same as being nothing." She looked each phantom in the eye. "You threw me away because I didn't fit your expectations. But I survived. I lived. I found purpose. And I'm here now facing trials you couldn't even imagine because I chose to. Not because of you, in spite of you." The chamber shook. The figures began to dissolve, their voices fading. "I don't need your approval," Elin continued, gaining momentum. "I don't need your acceptance. I don't need anything from you except to be left in my past where you belong." The last figure, her father, reached out like he wanted to grab her. But his hand passed through empty air, insubstantial, and then he was gone too. The chamber dissolved. The path continued. Elin's legs shook, but she kept walking. One trial down. How many more to go? She didn't have to wait long for the answer. The second trial announced itself with pain. It started in her chest, a burning sensation that spread through her entire body. Elin gasped and fell to her knees. The stone beneath her was suddenly hot, almost scalding, but she couldn't move away from it. "Second trial," that inhuman voice said. "What will you endure?" The burning intensified. It felt like her blood was boiling, her bones turning to ash from the inside out. She'd never felt pain like this, sharp and absolute and everywhere at once. Through the agony, images began to form around her. Memories, she realized. Moments from her life when she'd suffered. Winters where she'd nearly frozen. Beatings from pack members who thought she deserved it. The slow, grinding pain of starvation. The deeper ache of loneliness. "You've endured before," the voice observed. "But that was necessity. This is choice. You could stop this, surrender, the pain would end." It was true. Somehow Elin knew that if she just said the word, gave up, the burning would stop. She could leave the trials, go back to the courtyard, let Kyle have his claim. All she had to do was quit. But quitting meant losing herself, meant becoming property, meant spending the rest of her life as someone else's tool. "No," Elin ground out through clenched teeth. "I've survived worse." "This will get worse." And it did. The burning became fire, became something beyond fire. Pain so intense it stopped being a sensation and became her entire existence. She couldn't think past it, couldn't breathe properly. Her vision went white, but she didn't surrender. She'd spent 22 years learning to endure. Cold that froze your bones, hunger that hollowed you out, loneliness that felt like drowning in slow motion. This pain was different, but the principle was the same. You just had to outlast it. Elin focused on breathing, in, out. Each breath was agony, but she took them anyway, counted them. 1, 2, 3. Lost track and started over. Didn't matter. As long as she was breathing, she was still fighting. Time stopped meaning anything. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. The pain remained constant, absolute, but Elin found a strange space inside it, a core of herself that hurt but wasn't consumed, that suffered but didn't break. "Enough," the voice said finally. The pain vanished instantly. Elin collapsed fully onto the stone, gasping, her body shaking. Sweat soaked her dress. Her muscles felt like they'd been shredded. But she was alive. "Second trial complete," the voice announced. "You endure." The path continued. Elin dragged herself to her feet. Her legs barely held her weight, but she forced them to move. One step, then another. The path seemed endless, but she kept going because stopping wasn't an option. The third trial started without warning. One moment she was walking, the next she was falling, plummeting through darkness with no sense of up or down. She tried to scream, but wind tore the sound away. She hit something soft and rolled to a stop. Elin lay there for a moment, disoriented, before pushing herself up. She was in a room, her room, the one in the fortress where Darius had visited her, but something was wrong. The door burst open and soldiers poured in, not guards she recognized, but warriors wearing Kael's colors. They grabbed her roughly, dragging her out into the corridor. Elin fought, but they were too strong. They hauled her to the throne room. Kael was sitting on Darius's throne, looking smug, and at his feet, chained and broken, was Darius himself. Blood covered his face. His armor was shattered. He looked beaten in every sense of the word. "Ah, Elin," Kael said pleasantly. "Just in time to watch your precious king die." "No." Elin struggled against the soldiers holding her. "You can't." "I can. I have. This is what happens when you refuse me." Kael stood, drawing a blade. He fought well, but cursed as he was, he never stood a chance. "Now say goodbye." He raised the sword. "Wait," Elin screamed. "I'll submit. I'll accept your claim. Just don't kill him." Kael paused. "Really? You trade yourself for him?" "Yes. Just please." How touching. Kael lowered the blade. Then he smiled. "But I don't make deals with tools. I simply take what's mine." He plunged the sword into Darius's chest. Elin screamed, fought harder, but the soldiers held her fast as Darius's eyes went dim, as he slumped forward, as the light left him completely. "Third trial," that inhuman voice said. "What will you protect?" The room flickered. Elin blinked, and suddenly everything reset. The soldiers were dragging her in again. Kael was on the throne. Darius was chained and beaten. The same scene playing again. "Stop this!" Elin shouted. "You cannot save him," the voice said. "Accept this truth." But the scene played again and again. Each time, Kael killed Darius while Elin watched helplessly. Each time she screamed and fought and failed to change anything. It was torture. Watching him die over and over, feeling useless, powerless. "What will you protect?" the voice kept asking. "You cannot protect him. You are weak, broken. What could you possibly do?" Elin wanted to give up, wanted to curl into a ball and stop watching, but some stubborn part of her refused. "I'm not weak," she said finally, her voice hoarse from screaming. "And this isn't real." Say, the scene froze mid-action, Kael's blade inches from Darius's chest. "None of this is real," Elin continued. "You're showing me my fear, my worst nightmare, but it's not happening. Darius is alive, and I'm going to keep him that way, not by fighting Kael's soldiers or trading myself, but by becoming strong enough that he can't threaten either of us." The frozen scene shattered like glass. Elin found herself standing in darkness again, but this time it felt different, lighter somehow. "Third trial complete," the voice said, and now it sounded almost approving. "You understand what matters." The darkness lifted. Elin stood in a chamber made of pure white light. It didn't hurt to look at. Instead, it felt warm, welcoming, like stepping into sunlight after years in shadow. And in the center of the chamber, floating in midair, was something she'd never seen before. It looked like a crystal, multifaceted and glowing from within. As Elin approached, it pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. "You have passed the trials," the voice said. "You faced rejection and claimed your identity. You endured pain and found your strength. You witnessed loss and defined your purpose. Now comes the choice." "What choice?" "To accept what you are, to embrace your nature, or to return unchanged and face your fate as you were." Elin stared at the crystal. "I don't understand." "You are harmonizer, but that is only what you do, not what you are. Touch the crystal and you will see." She reached out slowly. The moment her fingers made contact, everything changed. Power flooded through her, not aggressive or violent like alpha energy, but something else entirely. Balancing, connecting. She could feel the world around her in ways she'd never imagined. Every living thing had a resonance, a frequency, and she could sense them all, could adjust them, could bring them into harmony. And she understood finally why Kael wanted her so badly. A harmonizer could do more than calm an alpha's rage. She could influence entire groups, could prevent conflicts before they started, could reshape the emotional landscape of everyone around her. In the wrong hands, that power would be devastating. In her hands... "I accept," Elin said. The crystal shattered, and its light poured into her. She gasped as it filled every empty space she'd carried for years. The wounds from rejection, the scars from survival, the hollow ache of loneliness. All of it flooded with warmth and purpose and strength. When it faded, Elin stood taller, felt different. Not physically changed, but fundamentally transformed. "Trial of severance complete," the voice announced. "You are no longer bound by claim or pack. You are yourself, wholly and completely. Go forth, harmonizer. Show them what you've become." Reality snapped back into place. Elin gasped and found herself standing in the courtyard again. The sun was setting. Had she been gone for hours? Days? The crowd was still there, watching with stunned expressions. Kael stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, and Darius was moving toward her, his face a mixture of disbelief and fierce joy. "You survived," he said. "I survived." Then Kael started laughing. It wasn't a pleasant sound. "Well, that's impressive. Stupid, but impressive." He stepped forward, and Elin felt the shift immediately, his alpha energy pressing against everyone around him, trying to dominate through sheer force of will. "But you've accomplished nothing. The trials void my claim, sure, but they don't make you strong enough to stand against me." He was right, in a way. Physically, Elin was still just herself. No combat training, no weapons, no army. But she had something else now. She reached out with her new awareness and felt Kael's energy, the aggressive, dominating force he projected, and underneath it, she sensed something else. Fear. Not of her, of losing, of being challenged, of discovering that his power wasn't absolute. Elin smiled. "You're right. I'm not strong enough to fight you." Kael's expression turned smug. "Then you've wasted everyone's time. But I'm strong enough to do this." She pushed, not physically, with her new power. She found the frequency of Kael's aggression and shifted it, just slightly, just enough. The effect was instantaneous. Kael gasped and stumbled backward. His soldiers moved to support him, but he waved them off. His face had gone pale. "What did you—" "I showed you what you fear most," Elin said quietly. "That all your power, all your dominance, all your control, it's just noise. And I can silence it whenever I want." Kael stared at her with something approaching horror, and around them his entire army began to shift. She could feel their energy changing, confusion replacing aggression, doubt creeping in. They'd come here ready to fight for their alpha. Now they were questioning why. "Leave," Elin said. Not a threat, just a simple statement. "Take your army and leave. Because if you stay, I'll show every single one of your soldiers exactly what I just showed you, and by morning, you won't have an army anymore." For a long moment, Kael just stood there. Then slowly, he smiled. It was different from before, less predatory, more genuine, almost respectful. "You're not what I expected," he said. "Neither are you." He turned to his commanders. "Pack up, we're leaving." "My lord," one of them started. "Now." Kael's voice was sharp. Then he looked back at Elin. "This isn't over. Sooner or later, we'll meet again." "Maybe. But next time, come as an ally, not a conqueror." Kael laughed softly. "We'll see." He mounted his horse and without another word, rode toward his army. Within an hour, they were gone. The courtyard erupted in chaos, cheering, shouting, celebration. Elin stood in the center of it all, exhausted and shaking, but somehow still standing. Darius appeared at her side. "That was terrifying, stupid, reckless?" "I was going to say extraordinary." He smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "But those worked too." Elin laughed, and then her legs gave out. Darius caught her before she hit the ground, lifting her easily. "Let's get you inside," he said. "I can walk. You just faced 3 trials designed to kill you and banished an army through sheer force of will. You've earned a ride." She was too tired to argue. As Darius carried her toward the fortress, Elin caught sight of the crowd. Some were celebrating, some were staring at her with awe, and some, like Thane, were watching with calculating expressions. She'd solved one problem, but she suspected she'd just created a dozen new ones. Still, that was tomorrow's crisis. Tonight, she'd rest, and maybe, finally, believe that she was strong enough to face whatever came next. Elin woke to shouting, Not the kind of shouting that came from celebration or daily fortress business. This was urgent, panicked, the sound of people who'd just discovered something very wrong. She pushed herself upright, her body protesting. Every muscle ached from the trials. She felt like she'd have been beaten with hammers, then left out in the cold to freeze. But the new awareness was still there, humming beneath her skin, letting her sense the emotions radiating from the fortress. Fear, confusion, and underneath it all, rage. Darius's rage. Elin scrambled out of bed and threw on the first clothing she could find, the simple dress from yesterday, now wrinkled and stained. Her hands shook as she tied the laces. The awareness told her something was happening 2 floors down, in the war room, and it wasn't good. She ran. The corridors were full of people moving with purpose, soldiers heading for posts, servants carrying supplies, nobles clustered in worried groups. Elin pushed through them, following the pull of Darius's energy. It felt wrong, unstable, like a wildfire barely contained. The war room doors were closed but not locked. She shoved them open. Inside, chaos. Thane stood at the massive table covered in maps, his face carved from ice as always. Kara was there too, armor half-buckled like she'd dressed in a hurry. Aldrich hovered near the windows, wringing his hands, and Darius was pacing like a caged animal, his eyes flickering between gray and black. The curse was active, fighting him. She could feel it pushing against his control, trying to tear through. "Can't be certain," Thane was saying. "The reports are inconsistent." "I don't care about inconsistent," Darius snarled. "Someone poisoned the water supply. That's an act of war." "Or sabotage," Kara interjected. "Could be internal. We have enemies inside these walls." "What happened?" Elin asked. Everyone turned to look at her. Thane's expression soured immediately. "This is a private meeting." "Then lock your door." Elin moved closer to Darius, feeling the curse writhe inside him. "What's going on?" Darius stopped pacing long enough to meet her eyes. She saw him fighting for control, his jaw clenched so tight she thought his teeth might crack. "Someone contaminated the main well. 3 people are dead, 15 more sick. Aldrich says it's a compound designed specifically to target alpha physiology." "Meaning it hits me hardest," Darius continued. His voice was strained. "I've been fighting the effects for 2 hours. The curse is using the poison as fuel. I'm barely—" He cut himself off, breathing hard. Elin reached out instinctively, placing her hand on his arm. The effect was immediate. His energy stabilized, the black receding from his eyes. He sagged slightly, like a string had been cut. "Thank you," he managed. "This is exactly the problem," Thane said sharply. "Your Majesty, you're becoming dependent on her. What happens when she's not available? When she's sleeping, or occupied, or—" "Then I'll manage," Darius snapped. "Like I've been managing for 6 months. Barely. And this poison proves that someone knows about your vulnerability. They're targeting it." Thane's gaze shifted to Elin, cold and calculating. "Convenient timing, isn't it? She arrives, displays this miraculous ability, and suddenly we're under attack from within." Elin felt her stomach drop. "You think I did this?" "I think you're a variable we don't understand, a stranger with unusual power who appeared at a suspiciously opportune moment. I've been working in this fortress for 16 years, in the kitchens, where you had access to food and water." Thane stepped closer. "Where you could have been planning this for years." "That's insane," Kara said. "She stopped the king's rage. Why would she do that if she wanted him dead?" "To gain trust, to get close, there are plenty of reasons." Darius moved between them, his voice dropping into that dangerous register. "Castor, stop. Your Majesty, I'm merely suggesting I know what you're suggesting, and you're wrong." Darius didn't raise his voice, but the room got colder anyway. "Elin had nothing to do with this. Find the real culprit." Thane's expression didn't change. "As you wish. But I'll be posting guards on her quarters, for her protection, of course." It wasn't protection. It was imprisonment. Elin opened her mouth to argue, but Darius caught her eye and shook his head slightly. "Not the time. Not the fight to pick." "Fine," Elin said tightly. "Good. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have actual security matters to discuss." Thane gestured to the door. Elin wanted to punch him. Instead, she turned to Darius. Will you be okay? I'll manage. Go, rest. We'll talk later. She left, feeling the weight of suspicious stares on her back. The guards Thane assigned followed her to her quarters. Two large men who didn't speak but made their presence very clear. Protection, sure. Elin spent the rest of the day trapped in her room, pacing and thinking. The new awareness let her feel the fortress around her, all the fear and anger and suspicion swirling through its corridors. People were scared, and scared people needed someone to blame. She was convenient. Night fell. The guards changed shifts. Elin sat by the window, staring out at the wasteland beyond the walls. The moon was full tonight, painting the frozen landscape in shades of silver and shadow. A knock at her door made her jump. Who is it? Sarah, from the kitchens. Can I come in? Elin opened the door. The young woman from yesterday slipped inside, carrying a tray of food. The guards watched but didn't stop her. Thought you might be hungry, Sarah said, setting the tray on the table. Dinner service was hours ago. Thank you. Elin waited until Sarah had closed the door before asking quietly, What are people saying? Sarah bit her lip. That you're dangerous. That you bewitched the king. That you're working for Kael Draven or some other enemy. She paused. But some people are saying you're a hero, that you saved us from a war. And what do you think? I think you're brave. Sarah smiled slightly. Also maybe a little crazy, but mostly brave. It was nice to hear, even if it didn't change anything. Sarah left, and Elin picked at the food without much appetite. Her mind kept circling back to the same question. Who would poison the water supply? And why now? The answer came at midnight. Elin was lying in bed, not sleeping, when her awareness suddenly flared. Something was wrong. Very wrong. She felt it like a physical blow, rage and pain and darkness, all centered in one place. Darius. She was out of bed and at the door before she could think. The guards blocked her path. I need to see the king, Elin said. Lord Thane's orders. You stay here. The king is having an episode. I can help. Lord Thane's orders, the guard repeated flatly. Elin felt Darius's energy spike. Pure, uncontrolled fury. The curse was winning, and she was locked in a room 3 floors away, useless. She pushed harder against the guards. Please, people will die. Step back or we'll restrain you. Frustration boiled over into anger. Elin reached out with her new power, finding the frequency of their stubborn determination, and pushed. Not hard. She didn't want to hurt them. Just enough to make them reconsider. Both guards blinked, looking confused. I really need to go, Elin said firmly. You should probably go, one of them said slowly, like he wasn't sure why he was saying it. Elin didn't wait for them to change their minds. She ran. The fortress at night was a different place, darker, colder, filled with shadows that moved wrong. She sprinted through corridors, following the pull of Darius's rage. It led her down, deeper into the fortress than she'd ever been before, to the dungeons. The smell hit her first, blood and sweat and something chemical. Then the sounds, screaming, not Darius, someone else. Elin rounded a corner and froze. The dungeon corridor was destroyed, cell doors hung off their hinges, stone walls bore claw marks 3 inches deep, and in the center of the carnage stood Darius, his eyes completely black, his hands dripping red. At his feet, barely conscious, was Thane. No, Elin breathed. Darius's head snapped toward her. For a terrible moment, she thought he wouldn't recognize her, that the curse had taken him completely. But then something flickered in those black eyes, awareness maybe, or just recognition. Elin. His voice was wrong, layered, like something else was speaking through him. Run. Not a chance. She moved toward him carefully. The curse radiated from him in waves, making her skin prickle. She could feel it trying to affect her too, pushing aggression, fear, the urge to flee or fight. She pushed back. The awareness let her see the curse clearly now. It wasn't just a disease or a spell. It was something alive, something that fed on alpha energy and grew stronger with every episode. And it was killing him. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but soon, unless she stopped it. Darius, Elin said quietly, still approaching. Look at me. I can't. I'll hurt you. You won't. She was close enough to touch him now. Blood covered his hands, his arms, his face. Some of it was Thane's, some of it was his own. Because I'm not afraid of you. You should be. Probably, but I'm not. She reached out and placed both hands on his chest, right over his heart. The curse recoiled. Elin felt it thrashing inside him, fighting against her touch. But she held on, pushing her awareness deeper, finding the frequency of his rage, his pain, his fear. And underneath it all, she found him. The real Darius, trapped and screaming. "I've got you," she whispered. "Hold on." She pulled. Not physically, with her power. She grabbed onto his true self and pulled while pushing against the curse. It was like trying to separate oil from water with bare hands. They didn't want to split, kept sliding back together. But Elin was stubborn, and she'd survived the trials. She'd faced her own demons and come out stronger. This was just one more trial. She pulled harder, pouring everything she had into it. The curse fought back, trying to consume her too. She felt its hunger, its endless need to destroy and dominate. It wanted her power, wanted to twist it into something dark. "Not happening," Elin ground out. The curse shrieked, actually shrieked, a sound that existed only in her awareness but felt like claws on her soul. Then something gave. A connection snapped. The darkness tore free from Darius and lashed out at her. Elin screamed. Pain exploded through her entire body. The curse wrapped around her awareness like a living thing, squeezing, trying to break her the way it had broken Darius. She could feel it probing for weaknesses, looking for trauma to exploit. And it found plenty, every rejection, every moment of loneliness, every time she'd felt worthless and broken and unwanted. The curse dug into all of it, dragging those feelings to the surface, trying to drown her in them. But Elin had faced this already, in the trials. And she'd survived by accepting those wounds without letting them define her. "You don't own me," she said through gritted teeth. "And you don't own him either." She pushed one final time, using everything she'd learned, not fighting the curse with force, but with harmony. She found its frequency and shifted it, changed it, made it something that couldn't survive in this reality. The curse shattered. Elin felt it break apart into 1,000 pieces, each one dissolving into nothing. The pain vanished. The pressure lifted, and she was left standing there, shaking and exhausted, with Darius collapsed against her. His eyes were gray again, human, confused. What happened?" he asked. "I think I just cured you." He stared at her. "You what?" Before Elin could answer, Thane groaned. She'd forgotten about him. The older man was pushing himself upright, blood running from a cut on his forehead, his expression dazed. "Lord Thane," Darius said, immediately moving to help him. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to—" "It wasn't you," Thane said hoarsely. "The poison. Someone added something to my evening wine. I came down here to check on a prisoner, and then—" He looked at his hands, also bloody. "I don't remember. Just pain. And rage, and—" He stopped, realization dawning. "The poison wasn't meant to kill," Aldrich said from the corridor entrance. The mage had arrived with several guards, all of them staring at the destroyed dungeon. "It was meant to trigger the curse, to make you lose control in a public way." "Assassination," Kara said, appearing behind Aldrich. "Or character destruction. Make the king look like a monster so people would support removing him." "But why poison Thane too?" Darius asked. "Maybe they didn't. Maybe—" Aldrich stopped, his eyes widening. "Oh no." "What?" Elin asked. "The compound I detected in the water, it's not a poison. It's a catalyst. It doesn't create the curse. It activates existing curse markers." He looked at Thane. "My lord, have you been experiencing any unusual symptoms lately? Aggression? Difficulty controlling your temper?" Thane's face went gray. "For the past 3 months, I thought it was just stress." "You're cursed too," Elin said quietly. "Someone cursed both of you." The room went silent. Darius's voice was dangerously calm. "Who has access to both the water supply and our food?" "Dozens of people," Kara said. "Servants, cooks, guards, all of whom have been working here for years," Thane interrupted. "This isn't a new infiltration. It's someone we trust." "Then we interview everyone," Darius said. "Starting now. No one sleeps until we find—" A scream echoed through the fortress. Then another. And another. Kara was already running toward the stairs. "That's coming from the main hall." They followed her up, Darius supporting Thane, while Elin and Aldrich brought up the rear. The screaming got louder as they climbed, more voices joining in. Not pain screams, terror. They burst into the main hall and stopped. People were everywhere, servants, guards, nobles, all of them exhibiting signs of rage. Fighting each other, destroying furniture, eyes flickering black. "The catalyst," Aldrich whispered. "It's in the dinner service. Everyone who ate tonight is being affected." There had to be 100 people in the hall. Maybe more. All of them cursed. All of them losing control. "We need to contain them," Kara shouted over the chaos, "before they kill each other." But her guards were cursed too. Half of them were already fighting amongst themselves. Darius turned to Elin. "Can you do what you just did? For all of them?" Elin looked at the chaos, felt the sheer volume of rage and pain radiating from 100 cursed people. It was overwhelming, a tidal wave of darkness. "I don't know," she admitted. "Try, please." She wanted to say no, wanted to tell him this was impossible. She'd barely managed to cure one person, and it had nearly destroyed her, but people were dying right in front of her. Elin stepped forward into the hall. Immediately, 3 cursed servants rushed her. Darius intercepted them, knocking them back with more force than necessary. Kara formed a defensive perimeter around her. "Do what you need to do," the commander said. "We'll keep them off you." Elin closed her eyes and reached out with her awareness. The curse was everywhere, hundreds of infected frequencies, all screaming at once. It was too much, too chaotic. She couldn't grab them all individually, but maybe she didn't have to. In the trials, she'd learned to find her own frequency, her own core. What if she could project that? Create a harmony so strong it overpowered the curse's discord? It was worth trying. Elin planted her feet and pushed, not at any individual person, but at the space itself. She found her frequency, the calm, balanced center that had survived rejection and pain and trials, and amplified it, made it louder, stronger. The effect rippled outward like a stone thrown in still water. The nearest cursed people stopped mid-attack, blinking in confusion. The black drained from their eyes. They looked around at the destruction they'd caused. Horror dawning. Elin pushed harder. The ripple spread farther. More people stopped fighting. The screaming died down, but it was taking everything she had. Her legs shook, her vision blurred. The curse fought back, trying to drown her signal in its noise. She was failing. There were too many. The curse was too strong. Then someone touched her hand. Elin's eyes flew open. Sarah stood beside her, pale but determined. "What can I do?" "You can't. You'll get hurt." "Tell me what to do." There wasn't time to argue. "Hold on to me, and think about the calmest moment of your life." Sarah gripped her hand tightly. A second later, Elin felt it. Another frequency joining hers. Not as strong, but pure. Untainted by curse or trauma. It helped. The ripple grew stronger. More people joined them, Mira from the kitchens, young guards who'd managed to resist the curse. Even Aldrich, though his magical frequency was chaotic and hard to work with. They formed a chain, each one adding their own calm to Elin's broadcast. The curse shattered all at once. It didn't dissolve gradually. It just broke. Like a glass pushed past its limit. Elin felt it happen. Every cursed person in the hall suddenly freed, their true selves snapping back into place. The silence was deafening. Then people started collapsing. The physical toll of fighting the curse caught up all at once. Servants crumpled where they stood. Guards went to their knees. Even Thane sagged against a wall. Elin tried to stay upright. Failed. Her legs gave out. Darius caught her before she hit the floor. "I've got you." "Is everyone okay?" "You just saved 100 people. Yes, everyone's okay." He looked at her with something like awe. "How did you—" "I didn't. We did." Elin gestured weakly at the people who'd helped her. "Together." "Touching sentiment," a voice said from the hall entrance, "but ultimately irrelevant." Everyone turned. A man stood in the doorway, middle-aged, average height, wearing servant's clothing. Elin recognized him vaguely, someone who worked in the storage areas, maybe. She'd seen him around but never spoken to him. He smiled pleasantly. "Hello, Your Majesty. I believe we need to talk." "Who are you?" Darius demanded. "My name is Marcus Venn, and for the past 7 years, I've been systematically destroying your kingdom from the inside." He pulled a small vial from his pocket. This is the original curse, the one I placed on you 6 months ago, and I have enough of it to curse every person in this fortress 10 times over. Kara drew her sword. Guards. Ah. Marcus held up the vial. It's airborne when exposed to heat. One wrong move and I drop this on a torch. Everyone dies cursed. His smile widened. Or rather, Miss Rowe kills you all while trying to cure you. I've seen how much it takes out of her. Elin felt cold. He'd been watching, planning. What do you want? Darius asked. What I've always wanted. Your throne, your territory, your power. Marcus shrugged. I'm from the old bloodline, the family you overthrew when you took Varkesh. For 7 years I've waited, planned, positioned myself perfectly. The curse was just the beginning. You'll never hold this fortress, Thane said. The people won't accept you. They will when their beloved king is dead, and I'm the only one offering stability. Marcus looked at Elin. Of course, that means you're a problem. Can't have someone running around curing curses. He pulled out a second vial. This one was darker, swirling with something that looked alive. This is concentrated curse essence. Enough to overwhelm even your impressive abilities, Miss Rowe. I was saving it for a special occasion. He unstoppered it. Say goodbye. He threw it directly at Elin. Darius moved faster than should have been possible, diving to intercept. The vial shattered against his chest. Dark liquid splashed across his skin. The effect was instantaneous and horrifying. Darius screamed, his body convulsed. The curse poured into him like acid, burning through his defenses. His eyes went black, not flickering, but solid, completely consumed. And then he changed. His body grew larger, muscles bulging grotesquely. His fingers elongated into true claws, his teeth sharpened. The curse wasn't just controlling him anymore, it was transforming him, making him into something that wasn't entirely human. Beautiful, Marcus breathed. The perfect weapon. Shame he won't remember any of... Darius's hand shot out and closed around Marcus's throat, lifted him off his feet. The man's eyes went wide with terror. Wait, I can control... I'm your... Darius crushed his windpipe with casual ease, dropped the body, turned to face the hall, and smiled. It wasn't Darius's smile. It was something else wearing his face. Finally, the thing that had been Darius said, its voice layered with darkness. Free! Kara raised her sword. Everyone back, now! But the cursed Darius was already moving. It grabbed a guard, threw him through a stone pillar, tore another one nearly in half. Its strength was impossible, inhuman. People scattered, screaming. Elin stood frozen, watching the man who'd protected her, who'd offered her kindness, who'd become something more than a king to her, watching him become a monster. And she knew, with horrible clarity, that this was her fault. If she hadn't come here, hadn't helped him, hadn't gotten involved... Elin! Aldrich grabbed her arm. We have to go. I have to stop him. You can't! He's too far gone! But Elin pulled free and ran toward the creature anyway, toward certain death, toward the only choice that mattered. If this was her fault, then she'd fix it, or die trying. The creature that had been Darius Vorn turned its black eyes on Elin as she ran toward it. For a moment, everything slowed. She could see every detail, the way its muscles rippled under skin that looked too tight, the darkness that pulsed through its veins like living ink, the complete absence of humanity in its expression. It was going to kill her. She knew that with absolute certainty. But she ran anyway. The creature lunged. Its clawed hand swept toward her head, fast enough to decapitate. Elin didn't try to dodge. She just reached out with everything she had, her awareness, her power, her desperate hope, and grabbed onto the one thing she could still sense inside that monster. Darius's heartbeat. It was buried deep, almost smothered by the curse's darkness. But it was there, beating, fighting. Elin latched onto it and pulled. The creature's blow stopped inches from her face. Its entire body went rigid, trembling with the effort of two wills fighting for control. Elin pressed her hands against its chest, feeling the heart beneath, racing, struggling, refusing to surrender. Darius, she said, not shouting, just his name, steady and sure. I know you're in there. The creature snarled. Its free hand came up to grab her throat. Elin didn't flinch. I know you can hear me, and I know you're stronger than this. The hand squeezed. Not enough to crush. Not yet. Like something was holding it back. Behind her, she heard Kara shouting orders, guards moving into position, Aldrich chanting something that made the air crackle. But Elin tuned it all out. There was only her and Darius, and the curse trying to erase him. "Remember the throne room," she said, her voice steady despite the pressure on her throat. "When I first touched you and the rage stopped. Remember how it felt to be yourself again." The creature's eyes flickered. Just for a second, a flash of gray in all that black. "Remember the trials, how you offered me a choice even though you needed help, how you protected me from Kael." Elin pushed her awareness deeper, finding more threads of Darius buried in the darkness. "Remember last night, when you said I wasn't broken, that I was something else?" Another flicker, longer this time. "You were right. I'm not broken, and neither are you." She poured everything into those words, every ounce of certainty she'd found in the trials. "This curse doesn't define you. It's just noise, and I can help you silence it." The hand on her throat loosened slightly. Elin pressed her advantage. "But I can't do it alone. You have to fight too. You have to want to come back." For a moment, nothing happened. The creature just stood there, hand around her throat, trembling with internal war. Then it spoke. "Elin." Darius's voice, strained and layered with that terrible darkness, but his. "I can't. It's too strong." "Yes, you can. Focus on me, just me. Nothing else matters." "I'll hurt you." "You won't, because you're stronger than this thing. You've been fighting it for 6 months. You're not going to lose now." The creature's other hand came up. For a second, Elin thought it would tear her apart. Instead, it grabbed her arm, not crushing, just holding, anchoring. "Help me," Darius whispered. "I've got you. On 3, push with everything you have. 1, 2, 3. Elin pulled while Darius pushed. She felt him straining against the curse, using every scrap of will he had left. The curse fought back viciously, trying to drag him under. But this time he had help. This time he wasn't alone. The curse started to fracture. Not cleanly, not easily. It clung to Darius like tar, resisting every attempt to pry it loose. But Elin had learned something in the trials. Curses fed on isolation, on the belief that you were alone in your suffering. Break that isolation, and the curse weakened. She poured her own strength into Darius, not trying to fix him, but reminding him he didn't have to face this alone, that someone was here, fighting with him, for him. The curse shattered with a sound like breaking glass. Darkness exploded outward. Elin felt it wash over her, trying one last time to find purchase. But she'd faced it too many times now. She knew its tricks. She let it flow past without letting it in. And when it cleared, Darius collapsed into her arms. His eyes were gray, human, exhausted beyond measure but aware. "Did I kill anyone?" he asked hoarsely. "Just Marcus." Elin lowered them both to the floor, cradling him. "Everyone else is okay." "You're okay?" "I'm fine," he laughed weakly. "You're insane, running at a monster like that. You jumped in front of concentrated curse essence for me. We're both insane." "Fair point." He closed his eyes. "Is it gone? The curse?" Elin checked with her awareness, searched for any trace of that familiar darkness. Found nothing. "It's gone. For real this time." "How?" "You fought harder than it did. That's all it ever takes." Darius opened his eyes and looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You make it sound simple." "It's not. But it's true." She brushed sweaty hair back from his forehead. "You're free now. Actually free." For a long moment, they just sat there on the destroyed floor of the main hall, surrounded by chaos and debris and stunned witnesses. Then Kara's voice cut through. "Your Majesty, are you—" "I'm fine, Commander." Darius slowly pushed himself upright, wincing. "Help me up." Elin and Kara both moved to support him. He swayed but stayed standing, looking around at the destruction, at the people watching with a mixture of relief and fear. "Is Marcus dead?" he asked. Kara checked the body. "Very." "Good." Darius's voice was flat. "Search his quarters. I want to know everything. Who he worked with, how he got the curse, what else he had planned. And someone check the water supply again. Make sure there are no more surprises. Guards scattered to obey. Thane limped over, still looking shaken but functional. Your Majesty, we should move you somewhere secure. If Marcus had Confederates, he probably did, which is why I'm staying visible. Darius straightened, despite obvious pain. I want everyone to see that I'm still standing, still in control. The curse is broken. The traitor is dead. Varkesh endures. It was a good speech, the kind of thing a king said to rally his people, but Elin could feel his exhaustion. He was barely staying upright. You need rest, she said quietly. Later. First, I need to... He stopped, looking past her. Who's that? Elin turned. A group of people had entered the hall, servants mostly, along with a few lower-ranking guards. Sarah led them. They looked nervous but determined. Your Majesty, Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly. We wanted to say thank you to both of you. She gestured at Elin. She saved us. Twice. And you could have killed us all when the curse took over. But you fought it. We saw you fighting. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. We know Lord Thane has been saying she's dangerous, Sarah continued, that she can't be trusted. But we were there. We felt what she did. She didn't hurt anyone. She healed us. More people were gathering now. Kitchen workers, stable hands, the forgotten people of the fortress stepping forward. An older guard spoke up. I've served under you for 8 years, Your Majesty. Never seen you ask anyone for help before. But you asked her, and she delivered. That counts for something. It counts for everything, someone else said. Thane's expression had gone carefully neutral. Elin recognized that look. Calculation. He was seeing which way the wind was blowing and adjusting accordingly. Darius looked at the growing crowd, then at Elin. They're right. You saved us. All of us. And I never properly thanked you. You don't have to. Yes, I do. He turned to address the hall, his voice carrying. Elin Rowe came to this fortress as a servant. We treated her as invisible, expendable, but she proved herself more valuable than any of us. She broke a curse that almost destroyed me. She faced trials that should have killed her. And tonight, she saved hundreds of lives at great personal risk. He paused. I'm making her an official advisor to the crown, with full authority and protection. The crowd erupted in cheers. Thane stepped forward smoothly. A wise decision, Your Majesty. Miss Rowe has certainly proven herself worthy of such an honor. Elin wanted to punch him again. Yesterday he'd been accusing her of treason. Now he was acting like he'd supported her all along, but that was politics, she supposed. People like Thane survived by never being on the wrong side for too long. Thank you, my lord, she said with exaggerated sweetness. I appreciate your support. Thane's eye twitched, but he just nodded graciously. The celebration was cut short by a commotion at the hall entrance. A guard ran in, breathless and panicked. Your Majesty, we have a situation at the north wall. Darius tensed. What kind of situation? Army approaching, thousands strong, their flying Draven's banner. Elin's stomach dropped. Kael. He was back. But why? They rushed to the walls. Dawn was breaking over the wasteland, painting everything in shades of gray and gold. And spread across the frozen ground was an army, even larger than the one Kael had brought before. But these soldiers weren't in attack formation. They were just waiting. At the front, on a massive black horse, sat Kael himself. When he saw them appear on the walls, he raised his hand in a gesture that was clearly meant to be peaceful. I want to talk, he shouted. His voice carried easily in the cold air. Under truce, just me and Darius. It's a trap, Kara said immediately. Probably, Darius agreed, but we can't ignore an army that size. Elin, can you sense if he's being truthful? Elin reached out with her awareness. Kael's energy was complicated, proud, aggressive, but not hostile, not right now anyway. I think he means it, about the truce at least. Good enough. Darius turned to Kara. If he tries anything, fill him with arrows. Gladly. They met in the open ground between the fortress and the army, Darius, Elin, and a dozen guards facing Kael and his own escort. The warlord looked different in daylight, less theatrical, more genuine. "Darius," he said, dismounting, "you look terrible." "I had a rough night. What do you want, KL?" "To apologize?" Kale glanced at Elin. "And to make an offer. I already rejected your claim." "I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about an alliance." Kale pulled a scroll from his saddle and held it out. "My spies reported what happened here last night. The curse, the traitor, the fact that someone tried to destroy your kingdom from within." He paused. "Marcus Venn wasn't working alone. He had backing, significant backing. And if they targeted you, they'll target me next." Darius took the scroll but didn't open it. "Why should I trust anything you say?" "Because I'm being honest for once." Kale's expression was surprisingly serious. "When I came here before, I wanted Elin because she's powerful and rare, and I thought I could use her. That was wrong. I see that now." He looked at Elin directly. "What you did during the trials, I've never seen anything like it. And what she did to me," he laughed without humor, "you showed me my own fear, made me feel what it's like to be powerless. I hated it, but I also understood it." Elin studied him carefully. His energy was sincere, uncomfortable, but sincere. "What happened to your army?" Darius asked. "You had thousands of soldiers ready to fight. Why pull back?" "Because half of them were questioning why we were there in the first place. After Elin," he trailed off, "you broke something, not just in me, in the whole structure we've built. This idea that alphas dominate and everyone else submits. That power means control. You challenged it just by existing." "So what?" Elin said. "You decided to become a better person overnight?" "No, I'm still an aggressive bastard who wants power. But I'm also smart enough to recognize when the game has changed." Kale gestured at her. "You're changing it, whether you mean to or not, and I'd rather be on your side when that happens than opposing you." Darius opened the scroll, read it. His eyebrows rose. "This is a mutual defense pact. Full alliance, trade agreements, shared intelligence. My networks stretch farther than yours, and you have resources I need. We're stronger together than apart." Kale shrugged. "Plus, if someone tried to destroy you with a curse, they'll come for me eventually. I'd rather face that threat with allies." "You wanted to claim Elin as property 3 days ago." "I was an idiot 3 days ago. I'm trying to be less of an idiot now." Kale looked at Elin again. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For the claim. For treating you like a thing instead of a person. You deserved better." It was possibly the most awkward apology Elin had ever heard, but it felt real. "Apology accepted," she said after a moment. "But if you try that again, I'll do worse than show you your fear." "Noted." Kale turned back to Darius. "So? Alliance?" Darius looked at Elin. She could feel his uncertainty. Kael was dangerous, unpredictable, but he was also offering resources they desperately needed. "Your call," Darius said quietly. "I trust your judgment." That simple statement meant more than Elin could express. The king of Varkesh, trusting her, a former servant, to make a strategic decision. "I think we should accept," she said, "but with conditions. Regular check-ins. Complete transparency about any other ventures, and if he betrays us, we end him." "I can live with that," Kael said. "Then we have an agreement." Darius offered his hand. Kael took it, and they shook. Two alphas forming a bond that should have been impossible. The armies dispersed over the next few hours. Kael left a contingent of soldiers to help with fortress repairs and intelligence gathering. It wasn't trust exactly, but it was a start. Elin spent the day helping organize the cleanup. The main hall was a disaster. Broken pillars, shattered furniture, bloodstains that would probably never come out. But people worked together with surprising efficiency. Servants and soldiers side by side, nobles helping haul debris. The divisions that had defined the fortress for years were starting to blur. Sarah found Elin in the afternoon, covered in dust and grinning. "Did you hear? Lord Thane announced new policies. Servants get better quarters, fair wages, actual days off." "He did?" "Well, technically the king announced them, but Thane wrote the policy." Sarah laughed. "He's trying to stay on your good side." "I don't have a good side. I'm not in charge of anything." "Maybe not officially, but everyone knows the king listens to you. That makes you powerful whether you want to be or not." It was a strange thought. Elin, powerful. The girl who'd been nothing now wielding influence just by existing. She found Darius that evening on the fortress walls, staring out at the wasteland. He looked better, cleaner at least, in fresh clothing, though exhaustion still lined his face. "How are you feeling?" she asked, joining him. "Like I got hit by a mountain. You?" "About the same." She leaned against the stone. "Do you really think Kyle will honor the alliance?" "Maybe. He's self-interested enough that betraying us would be stupid. And say what you want about Kyle. He's not stupid." Darius glanced at her. "But we'll watch him anyway." They stood in comfortable silence for a while. The sun was setting, painting the wasteland in shades of orange and red. "Thank you," Darius said finally, "for saving my life. Again." "You saved mine first. We're even." "I don't think it works that way." He turned to face her fully. "Elin, what you did tonight, running at me when I was completely gone, that was the bravest thing I've ever seen. And the stupidest. I had to try." "Why?" "You could have let me rampage until the guards took me down. Would have solved a lot of problems." "No, it wouldn't." Elin met his eyes. "Because you're not a problem to be solved. You're a person. And you deserved someone to fight for you the way you fought for me." Darius looked at her for a long moment. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not. But you're stuck with me anyway." He laughed, genuinely laughed, and the sound was warm and real and entirely human. "I can live with that." "Good. Because I'm not going anywhere." Elin paused. "Well, actually, I should probably find new quarters. The servants' hall is a bit cramped now that I'm apparently an advisor." "Already handled. Thane assigned you a suite on the 3rd floor, near the council chambers." "Of course he did." Elin shook her head. "He works fast. He survived 3 regime changes and 2 civil wars. Adaptability is his specialty." Darius's expression grew more serious. "But that's not what I wanted to talk about. Elin, what you can do, this harmonizer ability, it's going to draw attention, more people like Marcus, or like Kyle was. They'll see you as a weapon or a threat or a prize." "I know. And I can't protect you from all of them. Not if they come in force." "I'm not asking you to protect me. I'm asking you to fight beside me." Elin straightened. "I'm done being protected. Done being invisible. I survived the trials. I broke your curse. I helped save this fortress. I'm not going back to being nothing." "You were never nothing." "Maybe not. But I believed I was. And that's just as damaging." She looked out at the darkening wasteland. "I want to be someone who matters, who helps people, who makes things better. And if that draws attention, then fine. I'll deal with it." Darius studied her. "You really have changed. The trials changed me. You changed me. This whole mess changed me." Elin smiled slightly. "I'm still figuring out who I am now, but I know I'm not who I was. For what it's worth, I like who you're becoming." "Yeah?" "Yeah." He moved closer. "And I'd like to be part of that journey, if you'll have me." Elin's heart did something complicated in her chest. "As what? King and advisor?" "As whatever we decide we want to be." Darius reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away. When she didn't, he touched her face with careful gentleness. "I'm not good at this. Feelings and vulnerability and all that. But you make me want to try. I'm not good at it either. I've spent most of my life alone." "Then we'll figure it out together." Elin leaned into his touch. "I'd like that." They stood there as darkness fell completely, 2 broken people who'd somehow made each other stronger. The wasteland stretched endlessly before them, harsh and unforgiving. But for the first time in her life, Elin wasn't afraid of it. She'd survived worse, and she wouldn't be facing the future alone. Below them, the fortress hummed with activity. People rebuilding, healing, moving forward. The old systems were crumbling, new ones were emerging. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't smooth, but it was progress. And that was enough. The first snow came 3 weeks later. Elin stood at her new window, 3rd floor overlooking the courtyard, and watched fat flakes drift down from a gray sky. Winter in Varkesh was brutal. She'd spent enough years here to know that. But somehow, this year felt different. Maybe because she wasn't watching it from the servants' quarters anymore. Or maybe because she had something to look forward to beyond just surviving until spring. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "It's open," she called. Darius entered, carrying 2 mugs of something that smelled like spiced wine. He'd been doing that lately, showing up at odd hours with drinks or food or just company, breaking protocol in 100 small ways that made Thane's eye twitch. "Thought you might be cold," he said, handing her a mug. "Always am." Elin took it gratefully. "But thank you." He joined her at the window. They'd fallen into this routine over the past weeks, standing together in comfortable silence, watching the fortress change. Because it was changing, rapidly. The servant quarters had been renovated, wages increased across the board. Thane had established a council that included representatives from every level of fortress society, even the kitchens. It wasn't democracy exactly, but it was closer than they'd ever been. And it was all because people had seen what Elin could do, had watched her save them, had realized that the old hierarchies, Alpha at the top, Omega at the bottom, everyone else scrambling for position, were built on nothing solid. "Kale sent another message," Darius said after a while. His intelligence network found something, evidence of a larger conspiracy. Marcus wasn't the only one. How many others? At least a dozen, spread across 5 kingdoms, all targeting alphas with strategic importance. He took a drink. They're calling it the equalization movement. People who think the Alpha-Omega system is inherently broken and needs to be destroyed. Elin turned that over in her mind. Are they wrong? Darius looked at her, surprised. You think the system is broken? I think any system that decided I was worthless because of biology I couldn't control has serious flaws. She met his eyes. Don't you? When you put it that way, he sighed. Yes, but systems are easier to identify as broken than to fix, especially when they're built into every aspect of society. Then we fix them slowly, one piece at a time. Elin gestured at the courtyard below, where servants and guards were working together to clear snow. We've already started. You've started. I'm just trying to keep up. You jumped in front of concentrated curse essence for me. You're doing fine. Darius smiled, but it faded quickly. The equalization movement won't stop with Marcus. If they're organized enough to coordinate across kingdoms, they'll come at us again. Probably harder. Let them. We'll handle it. You're very confident for someone who was invisible 3 weeks ago. I'm not invisible anymore, and neither are a lot of other people. Elin took a drink of the spiced wine. It burned pleasantly going down. That's what they're really afraid of, isn't it? Not just alphas losing power, but everyone else realizing they don't have to accept the old rules. Probably. Which makes you incredibly dangerous to them. Good. I've been underestimated my whole life. I'm done with that. They stood in silence again. Outside, the snow was accumulating. By morning, the fortress would be buried under a white blanket. They'd dig out like they did every winter. But this time, more people would have warm quarters to return to. Better food, fair treatment, small victories. But they mattered. There's a council meeting tomorrow, Darius said. Thane wants to discuss long-term strategy, how we handle the conspiracy, what alliances we need. He paused. I want you there. I'm always there. Not as my advisor, as my equal. He turned to face her fully. Elin, I've been thinking about what you said on the walls, about not wanting to be protected, but to fight beside me. I want that too. But I also want... He seemed to struggle with the words. I want it to mean something official, not just advisor, not just whatever we're becoming personally. I want people to know you have real authority. Elin's heart started beating faster. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we create a new position, co-ruler. Equal power, equal responsibility, equal everything. He took her hand. I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, and I know a lot of people will object, but I don't care. You've earned this. And more importantly, the fortress needs this. Needs to see that power can be shared instead of hoarded. Darius, you don't have to answer now. Think about it. Talk to people. Whatever you need. He squeezed her hand gently. But know that I'm serious. This isn't some romantic gesture. It's strategic. You change how people think just by existing. Imagine what you could do with actual authority behind it. Elin stared at him. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, but another part, the part that had survived by being careful, hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything." "Why me? Really? Not because I can calm your rage or because I'm useful. Why do you want me specifically as your equal?" Darius didn't answer right away. He looked out at the snow, gathering his thoughts. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but certain. "Because you see people. Not their rank or their biology or their usefulness, just people. When you touch someone with your power, you don't dominate them. You harmonize with them. You find what makes them themselves and amplify it." He turned back to her. "I've spent 12 years ruling through strength and fear. It worked, but it also created the conditions for someone like Marcus to thrive, for resentment to build, for the system to crack." He paused. "You offer something different, a way forward that doesn't rely on dominance. And I know, that's what we need, what I need." It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. No royal authority, no alpha posturing, just truth. "I need to think about it," Elin said. "Not because I don't want to, but because this is huge, and I want to make sure I'm choosing it for the right reasons. Take all the time you need." He left shortly after, and Elin spent the night staring at the ceiling, thinking about how far she'd come, about how much farther she could go, about responsibility and power and what it meant to actually change things. By morning, she'd made her decision. The council meeting was held in the war room, a space that had been reorganized in the past weeks to include more seats, more voices. Thane sat at Darius's right hand, as always. Kara commanded the left, but now there were also representatives from the kitchens, the guard, the craftsmen, even the stables. Elin took her usual seat near the back and waited. Darius called the meeting to order with his typical efficiency. They discussed supply lines for winter, trade negotiations with Kael's territory, intelligence reports about the equalization movement, standard business. Then, when the formal agenda was complete, Darius stood. "I have a proposal," he said, "one that affects the structure of how we govern." The room went quiet. Thane's expression became carefully neutral. "As you all know, Elin Rowe has proven herself invaluable. She's saved lives, broken curses, and helped establish new policies that benefit everyone." Darius's gaze swept the room. "I'm proposing we formalize her position, not as an advisor, but as co-ruler of Varkesh. Equal authority to mine in all matters." The reaction was immediate. Some people nodded enthusiastically, mostly the newer council members, the ones from lower ranks. Others looked shocked. A few nobles began objecting loudly. "Your Majesty, this is unprecedented. She has no bloodline claim." "The people won't accept." Darius held up a hand. Silence fell. "I'm aware this is unusual, but these are unusual times. The old ways aren't working. We need new solutions, and Elin represents that." He looked directly at her. "If she'll accept." Every eye in the room turned to Elin. She stood slowly. Her legs felt shaky, but she forced them to be steady. This was the moment. Accept, and she'd have real power, the ability to change things on a massive scale. Refuse, and she'd stay safe, comfortable, advisory, but not responsible. But safety had never been her goal. Not really. "I accept," Elin said clearly, "on one condition." "Name it," Darius said. "This position doesn't belong to me personally. It rotates. Every 3 years, we hold a selection. Anyone can be nominated. Servant, guard, noble, doesn't matter. The only requirement is that they've demonstrated commitment to the fortress and its people." She looked around the room. Power shouldn't be permanent. It should be earned, continuously. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Sarah, sitting with the kitchen representatives, started clapping. Slowly, others joined. Not everyone. Some nobles looked appalled, but enough. The sound built into genuine applause. Thane's expression was unreadable. An interesting proposal, though it would require significant restructuring of our governance. "Good," Elin said. "The structure needs it." "Indeed." Thane leaned back. "I support this measure. With proper oversight and clear succession protocols, it could work." Coming from Thane, that was practically a ringing endorsement. The other nobles, seeing which way he was leaning, began nodding reluctantly. Darius smiled. Then it settled. Elin Rowe is hereby recognized as co-ruler of Varkesh, with full authority and a 3-year term subject to renewal. He raised his cup. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, the council echoed. The meeting dissolved into discussion, some excited, some worried, all intense. Elin found herself surrounded by people asking questions, offering congratulations or concerns. It was overwhelming. Kara pulled her aside eventually. You know you just made yourself a target, right? Every enemy of the throne will now see you as equally important to eliminate. I know. And you're okay with that? Elin thought about the trials, about facing her worst fears and surviving. I've been a target my whole life. At least now I can fight back. Kara studied her for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. I'll assign you a personal guard detail, non-negotiable. Fine. But they have to be people I can train with. I'm not sitting around being protected. I'm learning to defend myself. Even better, Kara grinned. I like you, Elin. You've got spine. The days that followed were chaos. Good chaos, mostly, but exhausting. Elin had to learn governance, how to read reports, make decisions, balance competing interests. Thane helped, surprisingly. He seemed to have decided that if this was happening, he'd make sure it happened correctly. You have good instincts, he told her one afternoon, reviewing budget allocations. But you need to think 3 steps ahead. Every decision creates ripples. I'm learning. Quickly. Which is good, because we don't have time for a slow learning curve. He set down his quill. I owe you an apology for suspecting you, for trying to limit your influence. Elin looked up, surprised. That's unexpected. I'm a practical man. I was wrong about you. Admitting that is simply practical. Thane's expression softened slightly. You're good for him, for the king. You make him think differently. That's valuable. Thank you, I think. You're welcome. He stood. Now, about the trade negotiations with the eastern provinces. 2 months into her new role, the first real test came. A delegation arrived from the southern territories. Nobles who'd heard about the changes in Varkesh and wanted to see for themselves. They were led by a woman named Lady Octavia Thrace, an alpha with a reputation for being ruthlessly traditional. So, Octavia said at the formal dinner, her tone dripping condescension, this is the famous Omega who rules beside the king. How progressive. Elin met her gaze steadily. This is the woman who broke a curse, survived ancient trials, and established new governance structures. The Omega part is just biology. Indeed. And in my territory, biology matters. Alphas led. Omegas serve. That's natural order. Natural order also says people die of infected wounds and harsh winters. We've moved past a lot of natural order. Elin took a sip of wine. The question is whether your territory wants to move forward too, or get left behind. Octavia's eyes narrowed. Careful, girl. You're speaking to someone with 3 times your experience and 10 times your resources. And yet you're here asking about our methods. Interesting. The table went silent. Darius was watching with barely concealed amusement. Thane looked like he was trying not to smile. Octavia stared at Elin for a long moment. Then unexpectedly, she laughed. You have nerve. I'll give you that. She leaned forward. Very well. Explain your system to me. Convince me it's not just idealistic nonsense that will collapse under pressure. Elin spent the next hour doing exactly that. She explained the rotating co-ruler position, the expanded council, the better treatment of servants and how it had increased loyalty and productivity, the alliance with Kael and how it had strengthened both territories. Octavia listened, asked sharp questions, and gradually began nodding. It's risky, she said finally, giving power to people who haven't been trained for it. So is concentrating all power in one person who might be cursed, or corrupted, or just wrong. Elin met her eyes. Risk is unavoidable. We're just distributing it differently. Octavia sat back. I'll consider it. No promises. But I'll consider it. It was more than Elin had hoped for. The delegation left 2 days later. That evening, Darius found Elin in the library, surrounded by books and reports. You impressed Octavia, he said. That's not easy. She's terrifying. She is, but she respects strength, and you showed it. He sat across from her. You know this is going to keep happening, right? People testing you, trying to find weaknesses. I know, but I'm not backing down. I didn't think you would. Darius reached across the table and took her hand. I have something for you. He pulled out a small box and opened it. Inside was a ring, simple silver, engraved with symbols Elin didn't recognize. It's the traditional mark of rulership in Varkesh, Darius explained. Every king has worn one, and now you should too. Elin stared at the ring. It was beautiful in its simplicity and terrifying in what it represented. Darius, I'm not asking you to marry me, he said quickly. Not yet, anyway. Though I'm not opposed to the idea eventually. He smiled. This is just about acknowledging what you already are. A ruler, my equal, someone the fortress needs. Elin picked up the ring carefully. It was heavier than it looked. I don't know if I'm ready for this. No one's ever ready for responsibility this big. You just grow into it. He paused. But if you truly don't want it, I'll understand. We can find another way. She looked at him, at this man who'd been a stranger 6 weeks ago, who'd become an ally, then a friend, then something more, who'd given her the choice to be herself instead of forcing her into a role. I want it, Elin said. I'm terrified, but I want it. Good. Being terrified means you understand the stakes. Darius took the ring and slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Now you're official. Spring came eventually, as it always did. The snow melted. Green things started growing in the fortress gardens. And Elin woke up one morning to find she'd been co-ruler for 6 months. 6 months of meetings and decisions and arguments and small victories. 6 months of changing how things worked, one policy at a time. 6 months of proving she belonged here. She stood in the courtyard, watching people prepare for the spring market. Merchants were setting up stalls. Children ran between them, laughing. Guards patrolled but also joked with civilians. The divisions were still there. You couldn't erase centuries of structure in 6 months, but they were softer, more permeable. Sarah joined her, carrying a basket of bread. Thought you might be hungry. Always. Elin took a piece gratefully. How are things in the kitchens? Better. We got 3 new ovens last week, and the head cook is training apprentices instead of just yelling at them. Sarah grinned. You're doing, I assume. Partly. Mostly I just approved the budget Thane recommended. Still counts. Sarah looked out at the courtyard. You know, when you first stopped the king's rage, I thought you were just lucky. Some kind of fluke. But you weren't, were you? You were just the first person brave enough to try. Or stupid enough. Same thing sometimes. Sarah squeezed her shoulder. Thank you for everything, for showing us we didn't have to accept how things were. I didn't do it alone. No, but you started it. Sarah left to deliver the rest of her bread. Elin stood there for a while longer, feeling the spring sun on her face, feeling the fortress humming with life around her. A messenger approached. Young guard she recognized, but whose name escaped her. Co-ruler Rowe, he said nervously. You have a visitor from the eastern provinces. Says it's urgent. Send them to the council room. I'll be there shortly. The messenger nodded and ran off. Elin took a deep breath. Another crisis. Another challenge. Another chance to prove the new system worked. She found Darius in their shared office. Another change from the past months. They'd combined their workspaces to make coordination easier. We have a visitor, she said. I heard. Any idea what they want? Not yet. But when is it ever good news? Darius laughed. Fair point. Let's find out together. They walked to the council room side by side. Equal steps, equal authority. The guards opened the doors and they entered to find a young woman waiting, travel-worn, anxious, but determined. Co-rulers, she said, bowing. I'm Elena from the Eastern Plains. I've come seeking asylum. From what? Darius asked. From my pack. They rejected me for having abilities they couldn't understand, called me defective, dangerous. She looked at Elin directly. But I heard about you, about what you did here, and I thought maybe there was a place for people like us. Elin felt something tighten in her chest. This girl, standing here, asking for the same thing Elin had needed her whole life, somewhere to belong. There is, Elin said firmly. You're welcome here. We'll find you quarters, work, whatever you need. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Thank you so much. They got her settled with housing and had Aldrich examine her abilities, some kind of empathic projection, potentially powerful. Throughout it all, Elin kept thinking about how different this was from her own experience. Elena was being welcomed, valued, given a chance. That night, lying in bed, in her suite, with Darius beside her because that's where they both wanted to be, Elin thought about how far she'd come. From the kitchens to co-ruler. From invisible to essential. From rejected to chosen. What are you thinking about? Darius asked quietly. How strange life is. 6 months ago, I was scrubbing pots and waiting to die unmourned. Now I'm making decisions that affect thousands of people. Having regrets? No, just marveling. She turned to look at him. Do you think we're actually changing things? Or just rearranging the same broken pieces? Honestly, I think it's too early to tell, but I know we're trying, and that's more than most people in our position do. He pulled her closer. We're not going to fix everything. Some problems are too deep. Some people will always resist. But we're creating space for something better to grow. That has to count for something. It does. Elin rested her head on his shoulder. I'm glad I ran into that throne room, even though it was stupid and could have gotten me killed. I'm glad you did too. Best stupid decision anyone's ever made for me. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, while the fortress settled into night around them. The seasons turned. Summer brought heat and trade caravans from distant territories, all wanting to see the fortress that had changed its governance. Elin met with dozens of delegations, answering the same questions over and over. Some were genuine, some were looking for weaknesses. She learned to tell the difference. Kael visited in late summer, bringing gifts and intelligence. His alliance had held strong, though Elin suspected it was more strategic convenience than genuine friendship. Still, he'd been true to his word. That counted. You're looking well, he told Elin during a private dinner. Powerful, even. It suits you. Thank you. You're looking less like you want to claim me as property. I really was an ass about that, wasn't I? Kael sipped his wine. For what it's worth, if I'd known what you'd become, I would have approached differently. Offered alliance instead of ownership. Would you? Probably not. I'm still learning, too. He smiled wryly. But I'm trying. That's all any of us can do. The equalization movement struck again in autumn. Not at Varkesh, they'd learned that lesson, but at a smaller territory to the west. Assassinated the ruling Alpha and tried to establish a new government by force. It failed messily, with significant casualties on both sides. This is going to get worse before it gets better, Thane said during the emergency council session. They're getting desperate, and desperate people do terrible things. Then we need to offer them another path, Elin said. Show them that change doesn't require violence, that the system can evolve. Some people don't want evolution, they want revolution. I know, but we have to try anyway. They drafted a proposal, open invitation to any territory that wanted to adopt similar governance reforms. Training, resources, support, not forcing change, but facilitating it for those who wanted it. 3 territories accepted within the first month. Not many, but a start. Winter returned, bringing with it a year of changes. The fortress held a celebration, marking 12 months since Elin had become co-ruler. The courtyard was decorated, food was plentiful, and people from every level of society mingled freely. Elin stood watching it all, feeling surreal. A year ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was being toasted by nobles and servants alike. Darius found her near the bonfire. Having fun? Overwhelmed mostly, but good overwhelmed. There's someone I want you to meet. He gestured to an older woman approaching, gray-haired, dignified, with kind eyes. Elin, this is Margaret Vale. She was my mother's advisor before my parents died. She's been living in retirement, but I asked her to come back. It's an honor, Margaret said, bowing slightly. I've heard remarkable things about you. Probably exaggerated. I doubt that, Margaret smiled. Darius tells me you're considering establishing a school for people with unusual abilities, harmonizers, empaths, others who don't fit the traditional categories. It's just an idea right now. It's a good idea, and I'd like to help. I spent 40 years in governance. I'd be happy to share what I know with the next generation. They talked for an hour, Margaret sharing stories and wisdom, Elin absorbing it all. By the end, they'd sketched out a preliminary plan. Small school to start, growing as resources allowed. A place where people like Elena, like Elin herself, could learn to use their abilities safely. As the celebration wound down, Elin found herself alone with Darius again, standing at the fortress walls. "You did this," he said quietly. "All of this. The changes. The hope. The possibility. We did this. Together." "True. But you started it." He turned to face her. "I love you, Elin Rowe. I know we haven't said it out loud before, but I do. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." Elin's breath caught. "I love you too, even though you're impossible and stubborn and way too used to getting your way. Takes one to know one." She laughed and kissed him, there on the walls with the fortress spread below them and stars wheeling overhead. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "What happens next?" she asked. "Whatever we decide. Together." "Together," Elin agreed. The years that followed brought more challenges, more crises, more moments of doubt and fear and exhaustion. The equalization movement fractured into different factions, some willing to work within changing systems, others committed to violent revolution. Neighboring territories watched Varkesh with a mixture of fascination and suspicion. The rotating co-ruler position created complications nobody had anticipated, but it also created opportunities, new voices, fresh perspectives, ideas that never would have surfaced under the old system. Elena became the second rotating co-ruler after Elin's first term ended. Elin stepped back gracefully, returning to an advisory role, surprised to find she didn't resent it. Watching Elena lead with her own style, her own ideas, that was satisfying in ways Elin hadn't expected. Darius struggled more with the transition. He'd gotten used to ruling with Elin. Having someone new took adjustment, but he managed because the alternative was abandoning the entire experiment. Elin used her time to build the school. It started with 5 students in a converted storage building. Within 3 years, it had 50 students and its own dedicated facility. People came from across multiple kingdoms, outcasts and rejected and misunderstood, all finding a place where their differences were valued. Sarah became head administrator. Aldrich taught magical theory. Margaret handled governance and history. And Elin taught practical application, how to use unusual abilities without losing yourself. On the 5th anniversary of the night she'd first touched Darius's rage, Elin stood in the school courtyard watching students practice. A young harmonizer was learning to project calm without depleting herself. An empath was studying emotional boundaries. A telekinetic was carefully moving stones from pile to pile. All of them focused. Safe. Belonging. "Quite a legacy," a familiar voice said. Elin turned to find Kyle leaning against the courtyard gate. He visited occasionally, maintaining the alliance, he claimed, though Elin suspected he just enjoyed watching things change. "It's not a legacy. It's just work. Work that will outlast you. That's the definition of legacy." He moved closer. "The Southern Territories are adopting your model." Octavia finally convinced her council. "She sends her regards, by the way." "That's unexpected." "Change usually is. You taught me that." Kale looked at the students. "My territory is considering it too. The rotating leadership. I'm not sure I'm ready to give up power, but I'm thinking about it." "Thinking is a start." "Indeed." He smiled. "You've accomplished something remarkable, Elin Rowe. You didn't just survive being rejected. You used it to build something better." After he left, Elin sat on a bench and watched the sunset paint the mountains gold and orange. Darius found her there eventually. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Everything. Nothing. How strange it all is. Life being strange or you being here?" "Both." She leaned against him. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't run into that throne room?" "Every day. And I'm grateful every time that you did. Even though it's been messy and complicated and nothing like what either of us expected? Especially because of that." Darius kissed the top of her head. Perfect doesn't exist, but this, what we've built together, this is real, and it matters. Elin thought about the girl she'd been. Invisible. Broken. Convinced she was worthless. And she thought about who she'd become. Flawed, yes. Still learning, still making mistakes, but undeniably powerful in ways that had nothing to do with biology or status. She'd survived being rejected, had faced trials designed to destroy her, had broken curses and built alliances and established new systems that gave others the chances she'd never had. She'd proven that the old rules, the ones that said alphas dominated and omegas submitted and everyone else fell in line, were arbitrary, breakable, changeable, and in breaking them, she'd freed not just herself, but countless others. "You're right," Elin said. "It does matter, all of it. Think you'll run for co-ruler again next term? Maybe. Or maybe I'll let someone else have the chance. There are plenty of capable people now." She smiled. "Either way, I'm not going anywhere. This is home." "Good. Because I'm not letting you leave." "Possessive." "Honest." They sat together as darkness fell, watching the fortress lights come on one by one. Inside those walls, hundreds of people lived and worked and dreamed of futures they'd never imagined possible. Because one rejected girl had chosen to run toward danger instead of away from it, had chosen to help instead of hide, had chosen to believe she mattered even when everything told her she didn't. That choice had changed everything, and it would keep changing things long after Elin was gone. The girl who'd been nothing had become the force that reshaped a world, not through dominance or destruction, but through the simple, radical act of refusing to accept that broken was the same as worthless. She'd survived. She'd thrived, and she'd proven that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is choose who you become and then help others do the same. That was her legacy. Not perfect, not complete, but real. And in a harsh world built on dominance and fear, real hope was the most revolutionary thing possible.